Congresswoman and chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, Marcia Fudge of Ohio, former chair of the Republican National Committee, now MSNBC analyst Michael Steele, Harvard law professor who taught both Barack and Michelle Obama at Harvard, Charles Ogeltree, author and PBS host Tavis Smiley, and president and CEO of National Urban League, Marc Morial. Welcome to all of you. What a unique moment Friday was for this presidency, for any presidency. And Congresswoman, I want to start with you. Describe the impact of the president coming out at the White House, speaking about race in such a personal and, frankly, off-the-cuff way.
I was very proud, quite frankly. I think that it was timely, but more importantly, I think that he could feel the anger that was going around across this country, and he felt that he needed to respond in a way that I think took a lot of courage. For him to basically say that we have a situation where a young man is basically convicted of murder, that someone can hunt you down and then say, I'm afraid, and kill you. He made it clear that Trayvon Martin had rights as well, and he made it clear as well that African-American men for a very, very long time have had to deal with this problem.
You know, as I talked to people inside the White House, there was a sense that he wanted to provide context for this debate. And I think it's important for people who may have missed the comments to hear a little bit more from the president on Friday, again, comparing himself to Trayvon Martin. I want to show a portion of that.
When Trayvon Martin was first shot, I said that this could have been my son. Another way of saying that is Trayvon Martin could have been me 35 years ago. And when you think about why, in the African-American community at least, there's a lot of pain around what happened here, I think it's important to recognize that the African-American community is looking at this issue through a set of experiences and a history that doesn't go away.
A history that doesn't go away, and yet, Tavis Smiley, you were critical of the president. You said on Twitter his comments were as weak as pre-sweetened Kool-Aid. He took too long to show up and express outrage.
I appreciate and applaud the fact that the president did finally show up. But this town has been spinning a story that's not altogether true. He did not walk to the podium for an impromptu address to the nation. He was pushed to that podium. A week of protest outside the White House, pressure building on him inside the White House, pushed him to that podium. So I'm glad he finally arrived. But when he left the podium, he still had not answered the most important question, that Kingian, where do we go from here? That question this morning remains unanswered, at least from the perspective of the president. And the bottom line is, this is not Libya, this is America. On this issue, you cannot lead from behind. What's lacking in this moment is moral leadership. The country is begging for it. They're craving it. And I disagree with the president respectfully that politicians, elected officials, can't occupy this space on race. Lincoln did, Truman did, Johnson did, President Obama did. He's the right person in the right place at the right time, but he has to step into his moment. I don't want him to be like Bill Clinton when he's out of office, regretting that he didn't move on Rwanda. I don't want the president to look back, David, and realize that he didn't do as much as he could have in this critical.
To Tavis's point, Professor, there has been criticism. It's been building over the course of the week. Janet Langard-Cohen wrote in the Washington Post, journalist and author, on Tuesday that he had imposed himself in this silence about race, and she wrote this: during this period of self-imposed silence, we have watched our criminal laws become radicalized, our race criminalized. Blacks continue to be faced with punishing unfairness and inequalities, soaring rates of unemployment, discriminatory drug laws, disproportionate prison sentences, unequal access to health care and healthy food, unfair stop and frisk policies, and accidental shootings of unarmed black men by the police. These and more are treated with indifference or contempt. We're told to stop complaining, to get over it. No one cares. Tavis's argument that this has not been part of this president's agenda.
I disagree with Tavis in a profound way. President Obama has been talking about race and doing things about race for a long time, and the reality is that he walked to the podium. He wasn't pushed to the podium. He walked to the podium. He's been trying to have this conversation, and this was the event, the criminal justice system, that pushed him over the level. And what he said about Trayvon was a continuation of what he said when he was shot in February 2012. I think that he said, if you read his statement, his whole full statement. He said, let's have a conversation on race. Let's convene that. Let's talk about, we made some progress as a society, but we still have a way to go. And I think that what he said and what he did and what he represents to us is a sense. People keep making him as if he's the black president. He's the president who happens to be black. And he can do whatever he can do for all of us, but not simply focus on one community or one
David,
issue.
what the president did is open the door to begin a conversation. One speech can't outline every single action step that needs to be taken. And I think the president agonized. It's not difficult to carry the burdens of history in a nation with so much history. But what he did, I think, is start the process and sort of sanction, if you will, the need for there to be a discussion and action steps. And I expect that there will be more. Because one thing is certain, the emotional court and the response, the vigils on yesterday, the Civil Rights Continuation March on August 24th, the Urban League Conference that will take place this week in Philadelphia. This conversation at the grassroots level, at the community level, within boardrooms and suites also has just begun. And I think what I hope it leads to and what I hope we will see is not only a discussion that started and ends quickly, but a discussion that will lead to serious action steps by the nation.
But that's the key piece, the discussion that starts and ends quickly. I hearken back to the gun debate, and the president bootstrapped the gun argument with his initial comments the day of the jury verdict in a way that it was disconnected. And if you look at the momentum behind that discussion, coming off of Sandy Hook and the raw emotion from the American people saying, we want something done here. Let's move on this. What happened? The discussion dissipated. And this was something that the president came in and again and heralded, but then let the out of it. So my concern on this is it's great to step to the podium. I tend to agree with Tavis. It's great to step to the podium to be in that moment. But then it's not so much leading, but continuing to inspire the conversation so that it doesn't die on the vine, that it does get life of its own. Because this is a conversation, quite honestly, folks, we need to have first in the black community before you start putting it so much on the president.
But look, it is the president must lead, but the president needs cohorts. He needs assistance.
Well, that's where we come in.
Wait a minute. Tavis, let me make my point, because my point is that in order to move a piece of legislation, in order to move action steps, the president can in fact lead. And the president is also in an environment of continuing obstruction that you know well, that you report on.
Mark, respectfully, Mark, nobody's arguing that he has been up against a headwind. The obstructionism is real. But with all due respect to my friend Charles Ogeltree, the professor's wrong about this. I would ask you, lay on the table right now the evidence of how the president has been trying, Tree, to have a conversation about race. I'm talking to Professor Ogeltree. Let me finish. Not just a conversation. I don't think that we have a litany here of things, of moments where he's tried to have the conversation. To the contrary, respectfully, he's tried to avoid the conversation, number one. Number two, when he says a politician can't have an impact on this, so yes, he gives a wonderful speech, but he basically kicks it back to the community leaders, to business leaders, to celebrities and athletes, and that's real, but the president can't absolve himself from it, number two. And finally, number three, I don't know how the president argues that he doesn't believe that he can have a role in leading us in a moral conversation. This is not a political issue. This is a moral issue. I don't know how he argues he can't lead us in a conversation on this, but he can on gay marriage. He can on a litany of other. He can on Israel.
But what is this,
but not race,
Professor? Okay, but what is this in particular? I mean, the president spoke about wringing bias from our lives. These are intimate conversations between blacks and whites that are very difficult to have in a big public setting. But I think when you start boiling it down, it is the question that I thought he was asking, which is, what is the this? There's no federal program that can deal with this. So how does he lead, and on what does he lead?
There is no federal program that will lead on this. When he gave the State of the Union address this past year, he talked about the idea that we have to do something about guns. And he talked very candidly about that. He talked about Gabby Giffords. He talked about about all the victims. He says, we want to vote. We simply want to vote. And that was him saying, I want this to happen. And there was a vote, and it failed, right? So he's been pushing that issue on and on again. In terms of what he's done for the community, it's very obvious when you look at the things that make a big difference. He's been pushing a health jobs plan from the beginning without success. Like, he believes in that. And I think that the reality is that we're expecting all these things from Barack Obama.